Sony Vaccaro is a basketball grassroots and marketing legend that is best known for signing Michael Jordan to his first Nike deal, making Kobe Bryant the first high school to NBA athlete with a signature shoe deal with Adidas, and being a major force in building LeBron James' brand under the Adidas grassroots platform, which resulted in the largest rookie shoe deal in NBA history with Nike. Vaccaro's influence extends beyond the basketball court, impacting the sports industry and the way athletes are viewed and compensated. In Sonny's recent memoirs, Legends and Souls, it details his life and the impact on the sports industry, including his advocacy for athletes' rights. I'd like to welcome Sony Vaccaro to the podcast. It's an honor to have you, Sonny.
It's an honor to be on and spend time with you and Dinos and the public out there. I'm looking forward to this interview because I have a connection to the city of Los Angeles, the state of California. I was involved with so many kids there and across America and all these years. But I sincerely believe if I had to call a turning point in putting these games together that I have been able to do, Dinos, over the years, California was belatedly added. Not that players weren't there, but they had a very small impact on what media was in the 60s and 70s and 80s. It took a long time for the world to know the ability of the state of California in the game of basketball, not football.
All right. Well, you coming from a small town right next to Pittsburgh, which is known for football, how could you come out and be such a big basketball guy from a football town?
Because football, it was, baseball and football were the sports that I loved much more than basketball. I wasn't very good, but I played on it because everybody in your high school played for a team. I got injured in football, and that's the irony of it all. It never would have happened. This whole trip of mine is so improbable. It's impossible to tell the people in 1 minute or less. But the reason when I got transferred from junior college to Youngstown State University, I was injured at the junior college. And when I went to play football at Youngstown, I was still injured and couldn't play. And by the grace of God, the assistant football coach was the head basketball coach. And for some reason, this man came to me and said, "We're going to keep you on scholarship. We like your whatever they like, my enthusiasm at 18 or 19 years old." And he said, we know that you're viable and you got this energy. Maybe you can help us get some players, basketball players, to come to Youngstown. That was the turning point in my life, because after that, Dinos, I started taking kids around the tournaments in the East Coast. You remember, like the Sharon Hoyle tournament in Allentown, Pennsylvania. I'd take kids. I just pick them up. It was a precursor to what they blame summer basketball for. But kids have been playing basketball in the summer all their lives, but most of it was on the East Coast. So that's what I'm trying to tell Patrick. I came into this world a virgin, and I'm going out. I owe my life to the sport of basketball.
I want to follow up with something Pat said. When you think about Pittsburgh, you think about Joe Montana, Tony Dorsett, Dan Marino, Dick Butkus. People have no idea how underrated the history of the influential figures, yourself, John Calipari, Sean Miller, Tootie Cerisione, George Karl. It's an area that doesn't get enough respect for its impact on basketball.
And you left one out in coaching, Tim Gergerich. Timmy's the quiet one and whatever. But basketball basically has taken over, that part of, Pennsylvania, especially, Western Pennsylvania, where we had a lot. A small story on Joe Montana. Joe was a great basketball player in high school. He was also all-state in football and basketball. His people wanted me to pick him for the Dapper Dan that year, and that was in the early years. And I said no. And the reason I said no wasn't because I didn't think he could play, was I knew he was a better football player and he was going to go to Notre Dame to play football. So I went to Joe's family. This is a true story. And I said, I got to give that spot to a kid that's going to get a basketball scholarship. Now, just so I can finish this on it, he had a scholarship to North Carolina State in basketball. So
Wow.
Joe Montana would have been rated, if we kept track in those days, as one of the greatest pure athletes because he was at that level, guys, an All-American in both sports. But that's the most embarrassing one that I can say that this is what I did. And I guess I did it with a good purpose, but I took something away from his life also.
Oh,
Now, what about George Carl? Was he in your first game or was he in the auxiliary game?
No, he was in the big game. Also, I knew George in Penn Hills High School. He went to the campus, mentioned in my book, the Big Ten camp. I knew his high school coach. I knew him when he picked, he was either going to go to Pitt or North Carolina. I was very, very close and I don't see him anymore, to George Carl. In fact, he got injured at North Carolina his first year, and I went and spent time with him at the hospital. So George was one of those Pennsylvania kids that no one knew played basketball, and he turned out to be a Hall of Fame player and coach and everything else. Yes, so the history, you're very good there, my young friend.
Well, hey,
What more do you got to try to trip me on here?
Well, we also have to come to the nitty-gritty here. Is it true or not? Tootie claims he used to babysit John Calipari. Is that true or not?
Well, I'm glad that I'm not around to cannot answer that, because that would be, I don't want to commit John Calipari to this without, I am not going to comment. That's the only thing I won't answer. I have no idea a lot of things that Tootie said he did.
I got one more Tootie question. He claims also to have coached a then young Lou Alcindor was it the 5-star camp? Is that true?
If he's anywhere near the 5-star camp at that time, then I think Garfinkel's crazier than what he was. So I just think our man Tootie had a very big imagination, and I'm not going any further.
You were bringing up forgotten Pitt coaches. I thought you was going to bring up Dr. Roy Chipman or Paul Evans as well.
Oh my God! How did you come up with those two names, young fella? That's absolutely true. They both brought tournament teams to University of Pittsburgh, which didn't have any. I mean, they brought it to another level, and then we had Ben went there eventually, and again Timmy started out at Pitt, ladies and gentlemen, Timmy Gergerich. So there was always this basketball field. But I think Johnny Calipari was the first one to break through on the coaching level to a major situation. The other guys were not from Pittsburgh. Johnny was born and raised, I think he went to Clarion College, a small college, I do know that, in Pennsylvania.
And Herb Sendick, too. We can't forget Herb Sendick.
Well, and Herb Sendick, I think we're going to forget a lot of things, so I apologize on that. There are a lot of guys coaching and, have passed and we're with it, but I think coaching was in the bloodstream of the Pittsburgh, connection.
Well, how about this? How about this, son? Even though we've talked about how Pittsburgh is a football town, what about the ABA franchise, the Pittsburgh Pipers, Condors with Connie Hawkins?
Pipers. Did
you go to some of those games?
Well, I went to a lot. I was very close to the guys. In fact, I was involved with a young guy that played for the Condors. I represented a couple of players. Mickey Davis. You may remember. He played in the ABA. He was at Duquesne. I represented him. So to Patrick, to go back to your thing, yes. And I'll never forget, I went into the president of the Condors at that time, and we did a contract, and he was a Pittsburgh kid, and everybody was going to shoot him because they were taking him out of Duquesne, which was better than Pitt at that time. And he said, you keep this, that guy told me, you keep this quiet. If this doesn't go through, we'll get him back in school. I never forgot that. But the guy was breaking the rules, telling me to stay with them. I'm trying to get this 19-year-old kid a contract. So the Condors and the ABA was a challenge, but Connie Hawkins unchallenged it. And you're right there, Dinos.
Who was the coach of the Piper? How did they come up with the word Pipers?
I have no idea, and I apologize for that. I don't. And I didn't know you'd ask me about the Pipers today. So you got me.
Oh, how ironic you bring up Duquesne, because my all-time favorite player is Norm Nixon, and he went to Duquesne.
Norm and I are very close to this day. I haven't seen him in a long time. He was one of the greatest players ever to play at Duquesne. And at Duquesne in the 60s and 70s, they were better than Pitt, but also if you guys can go back one step more, the NIT was almost as important as playing and winning the NIT as it was the NCAA tournament in those days.
Yeah.
And that guys and audience was something that was totally left out of the history. But Norm Nixon, they just honored Norm about a month ago in Pittsburgh. They just gave him a big honor. But he was the first outside guy outside of Pittsburgh, the local hero guys, Willie Somerset and Brian Jelarovich. They were all great All-Americans and thing. But Norm Nixon was the best. I mean, and Cy Hugo Green, you guys know a name like Cy Hugo Green? He was unbelievable from New York. He played for the Dukes. Okay. So you're bringing up history about Pittsburgh here that I'm proud of, and that was good. Very
good. And reading parts of your book, I saw where we have similar type of attitude towards school. I saw where you said be confined in the desk for 6 hours. We didn't have those little labels back then, but I might have had some of the symptoms, and I feel the same way. I was a good student, but I wanted to be out there playing instead of sitting at the desk too. So I know exactly what you're talking about right there, Sonny.
Well, thank you. And I think there's a lot that have that experience like you do, Pat. I mean, I think that's what makes life interesting in a way, how you start out and how you finish and what motivated you. But most of the time, if you're put in an environment of athletics or a sport, you just go to that. You go to that. It's like being able to sing or play an instrument. There's something when you're young, you're grown to, you're drawn to. In sports, and basketball was much easier than going close to than football. There were so many people in football, but basketball, we can play it on the streets, on cement, just with a hoop on a telephone pole.
Exactly.
See, that's why basketball was better. I think it opened up the door one-on-one. Can't play one-on-one in football and baseball.
Right. I mean, I still wear basketball shorts under my regular pants. I just still had that mentality.
Well, if you remember in the book, the basketball shoe, the young kid that told me about, changing the shoe world and getting me involved in, with Nike at one time, he asked me that famous question, Mr. Vaccaro, is there something we can do about a tennis shoe that I can have a better tennis shoe? Because the one I'm wearing, I have to wear to church, I wear to school, and then I wear when I'm playing. I'll never forget that. I call him Charlie in the book. But you're right. A tennis shoe, a basketball shoe, whatever you want to call it, was the shoe of the kids that only had one or two options.
And how long did it take you to write this book, Sonny?
All my life.
You were compiling.
It starts with that first chapter when my daddy was proud to have me. He shot the 3 bullets in the air. That's an Italian custom. But it is all my life, because I think the story starts, there, and it takes me right to after O'Bannon. And I've gone through so many situations. What I wanted to show in the book, what I hope come across, and what the two of you have read, and hopefully some people watching the show and listening to the show right now, will be an example of a guy who experienced a lot of experiences, and I didn't let anything stop me. What I hope the book says to the reading public and young people that, their parents may be talking about it today is, if you believe in yourself, Dinos, like you formed a little empire out there doing what you're doing with the camps and your association with everything. That was a love of the game that made you do that. So, and you fought through it. I believe a person who has a strong will to believe in what they're doing has a chance to succeed in this crazy upside down world we live in today. But you have to believe in yourself, or you shouldn't even try it, I think.
How did the name John Paul Vincent end up becoming Sonny?
Well, because my mother had a hard time bearing children. It was a couple of years, and then before they conceived me. And when I was born, I'm told, but I've been saying this now for 85 years, when she had a son, she said I was the sunshine of her life at that moment. Because I later had a brother, Jim. So those words, in some respect, maybe in Italian, I don't know, but in some way, that's what she said. I was the sunshine because it was her firstborn. She had a child.
That's beautiful.
That's what it was.
Yeah, that's a nice way to have a nickname, don't you think? Dino.
Yes, it is.
Yeah,
Thank you, Patrick. Thank you.
Now, Sonny, let's talk about the O'Bannon case and the attorney Housefield, and obviously you guys had technical success with that. That it kind of the damages seemed to be kind of murky. What was your goal there, short term, long term? What did you expect the result of that case was going to be, both in the short term and the long term?
Patrick, can I just look your boss there in the eye and tell him, what was that? Well, Dinos, what do you mean it's a little shaky? Shaky your rear end. It took 100 years for the NCAA, to be honest. They called them amateurs.
No, I mean the damages that ended up resulting in coming to O'Bannon. It seemed like the damages didn't equal what the claim should have been.
Well, the event, I'm confused with here. I don't see, my thing is now, O'Bannon gave every other kid a chance from this day forward, or 5 years ago, whenever they did this, a chance to earn money off of what they were able to do, instead of earning money and give it to the people that had nothing to do with what they could do. They had nothing to do with their ability, but they lied to them. So I'm going to stay pictured right on that, Dinos. I'm going to say, I watched the trial again. The lady that was conducting the trial on all these and trying to get these people together yesterday was the same lady she was the lawyer. She was a judge for O'Bannon. So I've watched this thing happen. Eddie O'Bannon basically gave up his life, his credibility, because everybody mocked him when he did it. Let me say this again to the public, Patrick, to what your listeners are going right now. He was the 15th kid I went to. 14, all those names, and the only one I use is Pearl Washington. He was the first guy, I said. All the kids wanted to do it. They wanted to do what Eddie did a year later. But they said, well, Sonny, I might want to get a job in coaching. My jersey's in a ceiling, like O'Bannon. He had a ceiling. He was the best player. Everyone was afraid of what would happen to their in the future for their contribution to basketball. Eddie was the player of the year. Eddie, they won the national championship. He had more, he did some things the other guys that said no, wouldn't do. That's what you got to look at today. It took someone like Eddie the strength. Now, go to today. I don't know where you were going, Dinos.
No, what I meant by that was he was kind of a trailblazer, almost, for lack of a better word, sacrificial lamb. Yeah. That the people behind him really benefited versus the immediate benefit to him and the people that were immediately in front of the table there. That's what I meant.
You hit and that's right. Eddie's the one that paid.
And like you said, he took that risk. He took the brunt of it, and when other people were scared.
Well, they always scored. And Dinos, I can remember when some writers wrote in the papers that major writers saying, well, he's taken away. He's just jealous because he's not like Eddie. Didn't end up in the NBA for a long period of time, didn't make a lot of money, but he was the college player of the year. And Dinos, you're right. To this minute, he's never received what he should. He should have got 1,000 letters from people. Thank you, Eddie O'Bannon, for putting 5 or 6 years of your life to the benefit of us being the kids today. Yes, he did. And I go along with that. Thank you, Dinos.
Hey, Mr. Vaccaro, also want to talk about your relationship with certain college coaches. I have a lot of tapes and old games. I came across the LSU Dayton NCAA 84, and in the middle of the game, they cut to you in the stands sitting next to Jerry Tarkanian. I'm like, I wonder what that conversation was about.
Well, every conversation with Jerry was something new because he never repeated himself. He basically had something to say right and come out of his mouth. But to your thing here, what was important to the television audience, they wish they could have heard that conversation.
Exactly. I was one of them.
Yeah, that's exactly the thing. Jerry was, a dear friend of mine. There's no question about that. But he also was a man that went through a lot of hell in the NCAA. What was happening and what did happen, I never give a damn what happened or how they treated the kids if they took good care of the kids. And Jerry certainly did that. But the biggest problem that Jerry had to face was the city of Las Vegas. See, it was a combination, because the two of you and other people listening to this or watching this program, and let's just understand, anyone, any school, any coach that helped an athlete in the 60s and 70s and 80s and 90s, the athlete benefited also. Maybe they didn't have enough to have clothes. Maybe they couldn't have a good situation. Well, you know what? That was the obligation of the people bringing them in there. Because I'll end up this subject, Dinos, with this. Unfortunately, I've lived to see a lot of kids in that era not get an education. They come in, they play their basketball or their football. They may have gotten injured. They never had another chance. They didn't end up with maybe a good job. So let's go back and start where we should have started. All these kids should have been guaranteed 4 years of education, not the NCAA at one time said, it used to be, when I was there, I wouldn't have had my scholarship, Dino. They kept me for 4 years. Do you remember when they took 4-1 and it was up to you to be a good player? The NCAA made these rules. Sony Vaccaro didn't. So let's get off of this, this stuff, ladies and gentlemen. Read the book and listen to Dino's show here today. Is the NCAA is the bad people. They're bad people. They made millions of dollars, and I don't care who makes millions. I'm happy for all of them. But they never took care of the kids that were the show. You watch these games this weekend. They were the greatest games in the world in a sense. The kids were competitive. They were doing all these different things. But the other thing you watched, the players out there were earning money. They got good. God forbid some would have more. Some of them not going to play pro. These will be the last games. Some of these kids are 24 and 25 that played this weekend. Okay, so that meant that they weren't ready for the NBA or may not ever be. But I'll tell you what, that little thing that the O'Bannon case got these kids, the NIL thing, that's a hell of a nice thing.
Amen.
And Cooper's done well. He's earned a lot there. Good for Cooper, but good for all the other kids too.
That's right. You know, it was good to see Dick Vitale back on the sideline for a couple of games this year. But man, Dickie V, we got Sonny V, and now we got Dickie V. Talk about Dick Vitale, baby.
Well, hey, Pat, you got to give this guy a big, different direction there. He's the show, Dino. You're asking questions. My man's giving me an answer.
He is the show. He is my PA announcer, believe it or not. He's a man of 1,000 voices. He's got Kobe's voice coming up for you here in a minute.
Well, I'll tell you what. I'm not going to get involved whether Dickie V could coach or not. He was a pretty good coach, but he brought maybe the worst player in the world to me, in high school. Maybe if Dino wants to say it, but I don't want to say it. He was the number one player in America, and that's when I first met Dickie V. And he brought this young kid to Pittsburgh to play in a game, okay? When the game was over, I think he may have been the only guy in the history of the Dapper Dan Rumble Classic to go 0-0 during the game. So I'm not going to say his name. So that's the truth. But I'll tell you what Dickie V did. He did more things for mankind when he had the opportunity to be an announcer, because what he's done for cancer and what he's done for the V Foundation and what he's done as a human being, that's the Hall of Fame of life. He gave life to other people. He gave a chance with that foundation. Millions of dollars been raised, but not only the millions of dollars, it's millions of dollars and millions of dollars until we cure this horrible disease. He made it his life thing. He ended up being more remembered as a man because he suffered something he gave back to the world. And that is why Dickie V should be whatever they call Hall of Fame in this world. And I'm not getting into that, but my point is he was a Hall of Famer for humanitarian, for the ones that suffered. So Patrick, to answer your question, you were a really good invitation. We'll put you on the next show.
Get a TO, baby. It grabs me right here.
Well, that's what it was. So Dinos and then Patrick, Dick Vitale had a great and having a great run through this life because he's helped others.
Hey, I watched this 30 for 30. I was touched. I watched your 30 for 30. I was also touched. So those are two great shows.
Now, Sonny, they say behind every successful man, there's a strong woman.
Yeah.
And obviously, you've been the face of grassroots. You've been the trailblazer, the pioneer, to a lot of the stuff that we take for granted now these days. But less people know about how big of an influence and factor your wife Pam, beautiful wife Pam, has been behind the scenes, organizing all your operation and really making it the first class organization that it was, from the ABCD camp to the big time to your all-star games to running the grassroots for Adidas, Reebok, etc. And can you maybe kind of touch upon that? How much influence and what has she meant to you as far as your career here at the grassroots?
What I can say, thank you for saying that. At one time, I didn't know what I'd ever do again. Pam was a very, very successful commercial actress for about 7 or 8 years in her life. And the incident in my book where I got amnesia, and it's in the chapter when I got sick and I didn't have any memory for 3 days.
That was in Paris. The French Open.
That was in
French
Paris.
Open.
We were having dinner that night that I had dealt with Dick Vitale and his wife and his family. So it's ironic you would be talking about that.
Right.
When I had that, she quit doing her commercials. And then that's when she came aboard in 1991 with me. We had been married, if I get 7 or 8 years by then. And she gave up her career to make mine continue and be successful, because she did run everything. And she's running it today, and that's it. And I know, ladies and gentlemen, you're both thinking that's the same Sony Vaccaro with no hair, and there's this young, beautiful girl there next to him. Well, that's my family.
And you're definitely an overachiever, Sonny. That's what I like about you.
That was her compassion for somebody that she said, this guy here is a pretty nice guy. She claimed, she wiped out everything else. She said, he's a good human being, and hopefully I'm going to enjoy being with him. And she has. So to go to your point, to go to mine here, after that, the amnesia, my whole life changed, because if you want to be honest, that was after I got fired by Nike and I was on the ropes with everything else, and all the other things were about to happen. And there she was. And we ended up pretty damn good. And we lasted a few years. And then when O'Bannon started, she was the lifeblood. We missed one day in court of the whole thing in the 5-6 years. So she made sure that I didn't trip and fall down the steps. That's what I'm saying to you.
Well, that's terrific support there. Hey, I had a question. When me and Patrick were in high school in the mid 80s, the hot shoe that people always wanted that played during our era was the Adidas Top 10.
Adidas Top 10.
And then you came in with this Michael Jordan, Air Jordan, and you kind of blew them out of the water, and they were down it seemed like they were TKO'd. Like they disappeared for 4 or 5 years. And then later, after you were done with Phil Knight and Nike, they reemerged there. My question is, I know Rob Strasser and Peter Moore were a very big part of that, but how did that thing really go down? Did they leave the U.S. market and decided to come back and realize Strasser and Peter Moore were there available? Or did Peter Moore and Strasser, after leaving Nike, needed a new venture and went to them? Who sought who out for that second wave of Adidas?
Anything to do with the shoe thing, and I know what you're talking about. I can't definitively do it, though. It was all Peter Moore on that. Going back, because also, Dinos, just to tell your audience, there were people at Nike that once Peter left that refused to even admit that he made the logo, that he was involved with Michael. I mean, he made the first 2 shoes. That scene where you saw with all the red, I was there that day. Obviously it was in the movie and you keep looking at it. But to go to your point, it was all Peter Moore. It was the whole thing in the shoe thing. He revolutionized the shoe industry until, what's his name, did Geezy or whatever his name, and please excuse it, had their own thing. But making it a popular image by creating your own shoe for whatever brand you had was put off by Jordan for a while there, because Jordan just suffocated everything. Jordan.
But what happened to Adidas? It seemed like they disappeared for a couple of years. Yeah. And when you were done with Nike, they reappeared. And obviously they went to Portland where Strasser and Peter Moore were living. My question again was, did they realize they had an opportunity to bring them back? Or did Adidas say, hey, we need to get back in this U.S. market? Who's the best people that we need to incorporate for us to do that?
Now I can answer that because I had nothing to do with making the shoe. That's what I was going. It was Peter Moore, and then Rob died 6 months into the buy. Then Peter went from just making the shoe thing to be the president. And Peter Moore, to your point, I don't know the names or whatever the heck they called him. It was him that said this was a hit. I'm confused. I don't want to tangle up my words, Dinos, but it was he who said, "Bring it back. We'll create it. We'll make something of it," because they need that. The reason Rob and Peter bought the company or bought part of America was they were in last place. Can you imagine if I said Adidas was in last place and then we got Kobe? And then Kobe had his own special one, as soon as he came out of high school. So Peter Moore has done more for that industry than anybody because he gave everyone else the strength to do things differently. And what do we have now? And allow me, Patrick, to go this far. Look what they're doing with the girls' shoes. There are players now that wearing, I forget the girl's name, but her brand, the women's shoe. There are so many different things you can do with that little piece of material, whether it's more cushion, more whatever. But it's all in the imagination of creating a shoe. That's all I can say. It's not very big. It's not a car. It's a shoe. Right. But there's different creations. Go ahead.
Didn't Patrick Ewing sign with Adidas in '85 when he came out of Georgetown?
Yes. And I remember why he did it because John Thompson, who was one of my best friends, and Patrick, they didn't want to go where you were at that time. Michael and that was running the world.
Well, particularly we wanted to go somewhere different by the same token.
Oh my, give this guy a raise. I don't know what you're getting, Patrick, but it ain't enough.
Hey, I don't want any problems here. Just get started.
Okay.
Now let's talk about the signature shoe. How did you come up with that concept? Obviously, in the early 80s, looking back, Converse had the weapon, which 3 players that I remember shared, Bird, Magic, and Isaiah. Did you take it to the next logical degree, or did you somehow think to yourself, I need something that's going to get him away from Adidas? Because obviously the word was that he preferred Adidas when he was younger.
The only thing I can say here, going back through, I remember it vividly. My job was to convince Phil Knight to sign this kid. My job was, with Rob Strasser's permission, was the idea that give all your money. So it was basically come down to money. Then we got to the nitty gritty when Billy Packer actually had to convince Phil Knight at the last minute to make a decision. Phil Knight wasn't on board until we were on board. There's no question. But what I had to do was not design it. I had to convince them to go all the way in. And history is, we're not on. I don't know where I exist. We're not doing this show. A lot of things won't happen if Nike and Rob and Peter Moore specifically, don't convince Knight that all the money on the red shoe, the key to that, what I want to tell your audience, Dinos, was that when Peter took that shoe and put more red in it, I know that was in the movie. I don't know if I can explain it well enough in the book, but when he put the more in and we paid the fine, that was the turning point. Of course, Phil had to accept that this is what we were doing, and he did at the last. But the logo wasn't done the first day. That's the irony. The first shoe out wasn't ready. And Air Jordan, wasn't ready to be Air Jordan during that first thing because it happened so quickly. It took so long to sign them. But that is what changed the world. And that's what gave Adidas a second life. There's no question about it.
I remember the one scene in the movie Air, Sonny, where you basically got to the finish line and you made the deal with the mom. You got the mom on board, but she wanted something that at that point had never been done. That you wanted royalties according to the movie scene.
Yeah.
And you went back to Phil Knight with good and bad news. Good news is you had him for the taking. The bad news was you never thought Phil Knight was going to agree to the royalties. What got him over that hump?
He went, okay, that, there was exaggeration in the movie. That happened and that mattered. We fought to get him all the money and then re-up the money and give him a piece of the shoe. Before that was a small period of time, gentlemen. It was like 3 months and that was over. The whole list took 3 months. It took at the Olympic Games to finally with Bella, but it didn't happen. That one of that last scenes in the movie where Phil says, go for it. He did do that, but that took so long to make the decision that I didn't know personally until he said it that day. You got it. You got the money. Go give it to him.
And the royalties.
Pardon me?
And the royalties.
In the royalty and the royalty. Well, it wasn't just the money, it was the royalties, because that's because the royalties led to him in the next contract, then he owned part of Nike. He didn't get what he had was royalties, but then what he had in the second contract because of the royalty was ownership. And that's why he's a billionaire.
Hey, Sonny, we're going to close this out with one more kind of quick question. Sure. The future of sports marketing. There's a lot of new hot brands that are making noise. Which is Roger Federer, who's affiliated with On, a great shoe out of Switzerland. You have Hoka, which is a very quality shoe. What's the potential here for a new brand to break into the basketball subsegment? Do you see somebody new appearing that can capture the imagination and the market share in this basketball sub-brand?
Yeah, I can. Okay, I got a minute or so. Caitlin did it for the women. Caitlin Clark did for the women what Michael did for all of them, because she was this personality that was pretty damn good. She was all the things that you want the American hero or heroes because of women to do. There were other great women basketball players previous to her, 100 of them, 10 of them, 20 of them, whatever there were. But she did it. Now, because my guy from Duke, to just
Cooper
finish
Flag.
everything, he's got it going for him. He's got the whole thing going for him. If he can now become a great player, then maybe something will happen. But I'll tell you what, I don't think, even though he may be great, he'll sell a lot of shoes. I don't think his charismatic thing carries over. That's the other thing. You gotta be communicative with this TV thing on. You gotta be able to talk when you're interviewed. You gotta have, this love of the game. And the Clark girl did that. And I don't, it's not that he's not a great player. You have to have that it. And Michael Jordan's it was when he put the shoe on, when he played the game, it was played. You saw him do those things. You saw him do everything you wanted to do. And then day by day, ladies and gentlemen, he ended up owning the company. That's what happened.
Hey, Sonny, it's a pleasure to have you on.
Great
Your book
pleasure.
is out right now, Legends and Souls, the memoir of an American original. That's an understatement, believe it or not.
Well, thank you.
Good luck on the book. Great to have you. And we'll be in touch as always.
Let's do it again sometime in the fall. All right?
Sounds good.
All right.
All right. God bless you. Thank you,
God bless
Patrick.
You too.
And
Okay,
Pam.
Dino.
Thank you for watching this
Pam.
Hooked on Hoops podcast with me, your host, Patrick Straw Pratt, our guest, Sony Vaccaro, and my co-host, Dinos Trigonis.
Presented by Triple Threat Collectibles and our sponsors, Prime Drink, Hydration Drink, Spalding. Great to have you guys. Looking forward to more.